What if the first warning of a coming galactic crisis didn't appear in the sky, but in the hands of someone who was never meant to hold it? What if a single night on a quiet Terran coast became the hinge on which two civilizations might turn? And what if the truth that could decide everything was carried by someone no one was supposed to trust, and protected by someone who never asked to be involved? Tonight, a choice made in the shadows will echo far beyond this world, long before anyone realizes what it truly meant. The night over Port Vega carried a low metallic hum. Evan Rook leaned over a generator, letting its steady vibration keep the empty shop from feeling too quiet. A sharp crack tore through the ceiling. He stepped back as the roof split open. A burning shape punched through the metal and hit the floor hard, scattering tools and dust. When the light dimmed, he saw a figure lying in the small crater, armor scorched, blue energy fading along the plates until it went dark. Evan approached carefully. The faceplate had fractured. Beneath it was pale, silver-tinted skin. A woman, not human. Her shallow breaths fogged the cracked visor. She whispered, barely audible, "Cold, please?" Distant drone hum rose overhead. Evan lifted her onto a worktable. The armor was overheating and trembling at the seams. Through the broken skylight, he saw red thermal sweeps crossing the clouds, thermotrace drones. They were scanning for heat spikes. One beam passed over the roof. He ducked. She stirred again, voice weak. "Please, do not let them take me." He pulled a welding blanket over her, hoping its insulation would blur the drone read. The drone hovered low, scanning. Seconds felt long, then the beam shifted away. Her eyes opened briefly, faintly glowing. "Suit, failing, need cooling?" "I'll try," he said. He dragged a coolant line over and fed cold vapor under the blanket. Her breathing eased as frost formed along the armor seams. A new alert blinked on his console, multiple military signatures moving in formation. The drones were tightening their search pattern. A low vibration rolled across the floor. Headlights appeared through the front windows. "Not civilian. They're here," Evan whispered, her gaze unfocused with fear. "Run, they will not stop." He opened the side door to the alley. Cold air rushed in. "Stay with me," he said. "I'm getting you out." He lifted her. She did not resist. A red scan beam swept the alley wall as drones passed overhead. Evan tightened his hold. The night held still. And then everything moved. The red sweep slid across the alley wall, then moved on. Evan waited until the glow vanished before carrying the woman back inside and locking the door behind them. The click felt painfully small against everything closing in outside. He set her on the worktable, under the lamp's yellow cone. The rest of the shop fell into shadow. Dust still drifted from the ruined roof. Up close, her armor looked worse. Fine fractures crossed the plates. The alloy wasn't Terran, it carried a smooth, shifting sheen that changed with the angle of light. Beneath the plates, thin energy channels pulsed in uneven rhythms. He lifted part of the welding blanket. A module near her collar flashed unstable readings: temperature, load, discharge. The numbers swung between safe and overload every few seconds. "That's not right," he murmured. If that system failed, she'd already be dead. Her eyes opened. For a moment, she tensed. Then recognition softened her expression. "Where are we?" she asked. "Rook Mechanical Bay, Port Vega, still Earth." She tried to sit. Pain stopped her. Evan steadied her. "You dropped through my roof," he said. She almost huffed a weak laugh. Her gaze moved to the damaged module. Phase shift suit MK2. Partial collapse. That the thing that fools scanners? It bends signatures, thermal, electromagnetic, partial optical, but the cryo-sync core is fractured. If it fails, they will see my Valen thermal imprint from orbit. Evan glanced at the opening in the roof. "Let's keep that from happening." He grabbed a handheld scanner. Industrial grade, but adequate. The readings spiked violently. "Too hot," he muttered. She watched him now, more alert. "You are not military." "No, I fix machines. That's my whole resume." "And yet," she said softly, "you carried me out of a drone sweep." He met her eyes. "If they want you that badly, I should hear your side first." A slow breath eased from her chest. "My name is Saray Valen. I serve with the Valar Data Council." He frowned. "Serve how?" "I analyze conflict patterns, signals, deviations. I design warnings, not battles." The wall console chimed. Evan crossed the floor fast. Unauthorized encrypted bursts filled the screen. Terran Defense Coalition transponders. "Closing in." "TDC," he muttered. "They're moving fast." "How many?" she asked. "A perimeter net. Heavy units." Her voice thinned. "Your world detected something. They think Valar forces are coming to burn your cities." He asked the obvious. "Are they?" "No. No hesitation. That is why they want to erase me." He stepped closer again. "You said you analyze patterns. What did you find?" "The interlink war index your leaders use was altered. Someone pushed conflict probabilities into inevitable ranges. Every reading demanded preemptive action." "Your people did this?" "I do not know. But the distortion did not come from Valar systems." He thought of the drones. The speed of the lockdown. "Someone wants us to panic." "Panic," she said quietly, "is the easiest engine to start." Minutes slipped by. Dawn threatened the horizon. The console chimed again. Ground forces this time. Armored transports. A command vehicle at the perimeter. Saray pushed herself up slightly. "You can still walk away. Say you hid. They will believe you." "And you?" he asked. "They will not ask questions for long." He studied her. Outside, drones circled like restless insects. "Here's my problem," he said. "I've seen what happens when people think they're right. Doesn't matter whose flag they wear. You owe me nothing." He shook his head. "You broke my roof. That makes you my responsibility." She almost smiled. A sharper alarm hit the console, an override challenge. They were testing his locks. "That's our cue." He shut down the coolant, pulled the blanket over her, and grabbed an old cargo harness. Not meant for alien armor. But it would have to do. As he tightened the straps, she whispered, "If they catch you with me, your life ends beside mine." He shrugged. Wasn't doing anything exciting tonight. He lifted her again. The overhead lamp swung, shadows stretching across the floor. Outside, engines rumbled closer. Evan turned toward the side door. "We're leaving." The engines outside grew louder, rolling through the alley like restrained thunder. Evan eased the side door open just enough to see the street. Cold air slid in. Rotating lights washed the block in sweeping arcs. Figures moved with trained precision. "Keep your head down," he whispered. Saray tried to nod. The harness across her shoulders tightened as he shifted her weight. He carried her into the dim alley. The night was thinning, darkness fading toward the first hint of morning. Farther down the block, a cluster of floodlights snapped on. In their center stood a man in a dark field coat. Posture straight, expression unreadable. Colonel Marvin Hale scanned the street with the calm of someone who rarely made mistakes. Behind him, a transport opened and soldiers stepped out in tight formation. A projection node activated between two headlights, forming a hovering thermal map. A calm synthetic voice rose from the device. ASTRA-9 Tactical Mesh Online. Displaying heat variance. Hale folded his arms. Overlay. Heat signatures faded into blue. A few yellow spots marked civilians in nearby buildings. Then a pulsing red bloom brightened at the edge of the map. Unregistered thermal source. Astra 9 reported. Exotic cycling detected. Off-world probability. 93%. Hale didn't blink. Distance. 600 meters. Vector descending. Movement inconsistent. Zoom. The map magnified the blocks around Rook Mechanical Bay. The bay glowed faintly from residual heat. Behind it, a smaller echo drifted along the alley, weak. Unstable. Subject appears to be carried. Astra 9 added. Mass differential confirms secondary human contact. Hale studied the echo. Bring up prior scans. Images flashed. Roof breach. Plasma scoring. A fractured impact signature. Hale traced one ridge in the projection. That armor is losing containment. He said, she will be desperate. A lieutenant approached. Sir, command wants status before sunrise. Off-world entry. Hale said. Unknown intent. One civilian compromised. Possible intelligence breach. Orders? Hale didn't look away from the map. We take them alive." The lieutenant hesitated. "Alive increases risk. If she resists." "She won't," Hale replied. "Her suit is failing." "And the man?" He touched the faint red echo. "Either terrified or loyal. Both are unpredictable." He nodded toward the street. "Expand perimeter. 8 blocks. No unauthorized thermal output." Astra 9 pulsed, deploying thermotrace patrols. 4 drones lifted off in perfect formation. Red sensors slicing across the rooftops. Soldiers moved immediately, sealing intersections with armored transports. Hale stepped closer to the map. "If they reach the industrial lanes, we lose containment." Astra 9 chimed, subject path shifting west, attempting escape. "Predictable," Hale murmured. "Fear sharpens direction." Evan reached the far end of the alley just as the first drone passed overhead. Its red sweep brushing the pavement. He ducked behind a stack of scrap frames. Saray's breath shivered against his shoulder. "They're scanning again," she whispered. "I noticed." He moved toward his old motorcycle parked behind a rusted compressor. The bike's frame reflected the streetlight. He lowered Saray onto the seat, her armor hissed from stress. A deeper engine rumble shook the block. Evan looked up. Transports blocked the intersection like armored gates. Soldiers moved in synchronized lines. Drones patrolled above them. He climbed onto the bike. His hands shook once before the engine turned over with a low growl. Saray forced her eyes open. "Evan, if you turn back now, they may let you walk." He didn't answer. He twisted the throttle. The bike lunged forward, tires kicking against the uneven alley floor. The narrow path stretched ahead, dark, closing, shifting under sweeping red arcs. Behind them, Hale's voice carried across a comm feed. "ASTRA 9. Confirm movement." "Both subjects in motion," the AI replied, probability of escape decreasing. Hale stepped into the street, code brushing the wind, then closed the city around them. The order echoed across Port Vega. Drones repositioned, floodlights swept the alleys, engines roared to life. Evan leaned forward, gripping the bars harder. Saray clung to consciousness behind him. The last pocket of night folded around them. Port Vega locked into pursuit. The bike shot out of the alley with a harsh kick of gravel. Evan leaned forward, shoulders tight, the engine growling under his grip. The road ahead cut between abandoned warehouses like a dark steel vein. High above, a red thermal sweep crossed the sky, widening as it searched for them. Saray held his jacket with unsteady hands. Her voice was thin. "They have locked my vector." "Yeah," he said, "I noticed." The first UAV slipped overhead almost silently. Its surface mirrored the night. Only the faint distortion around its emitter ring showed it was there. A soft pulse emitted from it, washing over the street like a cold breath. A sharp tone came from Saray's suit. "Carbon dioxide tracking," she said. "Ride faster." "That is the plan." He pushed the throttle. The bike surged, tires scraping the cracked pavement. They tore past a row of silent loading docks, each one hollow and echoing. Rusted chains swung from the ceiling beams inside, tapping in the wind like impatient fingers. A second pulse swept over them. The bike shuddered. "Thermal ripple," Saray said, breath shaking. "I can mask for a moment." "Do it." A dim blue shimmer moved across her armor as she triggered the phase shift fail-safe. Evan felt a sudden drop of cold against his back. Frost formed along her shoulder plates. Her next breath hitched in her throat. "Easy," he said. "The core is unstable," she whispered. "Each cycle pushes it closer to collapse." A rooftop vent clanged open as a UAV swooped lower. Its microwave radar fired a short pulse. The bike's frame reacted with a low metallic hum. Evan swore under his breath and turned sharply into a service lane. The UAV adjusted instantly. It matched their turn without losing speed. "Microwave short pulse lock," Saray murmured. "They are refining target accuracy." "How refined?" 98%. He grimaced. "Great." They shot through the service lane and out onto a narrow bridge of old steel. The beams groaned under the bike's weight. Water sloshed below, reflecting broken neon signs from a distant factory row. Another UAV drifted into position above the bridge entrance. "That one is waiting for us," Evan said. "He is not alone," Saray replied. 3 red sweeps crossed behind them, each one narrowing. Minutes passed like sand slipping faster through a cracked glass. Evan leaned low and accelerated across the bridge. A pulse hit the bike again. Harder this time. The engine coughed. The lights dimmed. Saray clutched his arm. "They're heating the air," she said, "raising your thermal output so I stand out." Then we outpace them. He veered right as they left the bridge and entered a maze of stacked shipping containers. Metal walls rose on both sides, painted with peeling numbers. The air felt tighter here. Every sound bounced back at strange angles. The UAVs closed the gap. One of them descended between the container rows, flying sideways to match their speed. Its red sensor beam flickered over the bike. Sparks crackled along the rear frame. "Evan," Saray said, her voice fading, "the suit is overloading. I cannot maintain thermal masking." He felt the cold through his jacket again. Too cold, too fast. "You are freezing yourself," he said. "It is the only way to hide the Valen signature." Her words trembled. Frost drifted from her armor seams. Her breathing slowed. Too slow. "Stay awake," he said sharply. "Do not slip out on me." "I am trying." He swerved around a fallen crate and slammed the bike down a slope formed by a collapsed stack. Metal screamed under the tires. The bike dropped onto a lower lane with a thud that rattled his teeth. The UAV almost hit the container edge following them. It corrected, sensors flaring. Another beam drew a bright red line across the ground. "They have a full lock," Saray whispered. "I am sorry." "Save that," Evan said. "We're not done." He scanned the industrial yard ahead. Pipes, vents, cooling ducts. He knew these lanes. He had repaired half the equipment in this district at some point. The old cold storage facilities ran along the next block. Their refrigeration units created dense pockets of chilled air. Cold air meant thermal noise. Thermal noise meant hope. "Hold on," he said. He cut left hard, almost scraping the bike against a water main. The path narrowed into a tunnel of overhead pipes. The bike's engine echoed through the metal maze. Steam hissed from a broken valve above them. A UAV followed, clipping a pipe and sending a burst of vapor into its own sensors. Its flight pattern stumbled for a second. That second was enough. Evan shot out of the pipe tunnel and into the loading yard of Vega cold storage. Frost clung to the ground. Refrigeration towers pumped cold air in steady bursts. Fog rolled across the pavement. The UAVs entered the yard. Their red beams scattered. The cold air refracted their sensors. The beams fractured into lines and halos. "Masking," Saray whispered. "Ambient temperature lowering detection efficiency." "Good." He steered toward the far end of the yard. A row of freight containers lined the wall, each one sealed with thick insulated doors. He spotted an old one he remembered repairing years back. The manual latch had a stubborn catch. But it still worked. He braked hard, the bike skidding across the frost. He killed the engine and pulled Saray from the seat. Her legs barely supported her. Her breathing was shallow and cold. The UAVs regrouped above them, trying to reacquire the thermal signature. "Saray," he said, gripping her shoulders, "I need you with me. I can stand a moment?" He dragged her toward the container. His breath fogged in the air. Distantly, he felt the hum of approaching transports. The window was closing fast. He reached the latch. Another pulse hit the yard. The fog rippled in red waves. The UAVs were seconds from full reacquisition. He pulled the latch. The insulated door yawned open, releasing a thick burst of cold. He turned to her. "Get inside, now." Her eyes met his with a mix of fear and trust. She stepped into the dark. The insulated door slammed shut, cutting off the last trace of outside sound. Evan stood still, chest heaving, as the cold air wrapped around them like a dense curtain. The container lights flicked on with a brittle hum, casting a harsh white glow across the steel walls. Frost clung to every surface. Their breath drifted as pale mist. Saray swayed on her feet. Her armor hissed from thermal shock. A faint crackle moved along the damaged plates. Evan caught her before she collapsed entirely and lowered her onto an empty pallet near the wall. "Easy," he said, You are burning up and freezing at the same time." Her eyes fluttered open, thin and unfocused. "The cryo-sink core is fractured. It cannot regulate cycles." "Yeah, I noticed when you almost iced your own arm off." He moved toward the tool rack welded into the wall. "Let me see what I can do." The container shook as a drone swept overhead. Cold dust sifted from the ceiling. The hum faded, then rose again farther away. They were searching the yard in widening arcs. Inside, the air held perfectly still. Evan knelt beside her and pulled the welding blanket away from the worst of the damage. The armor's inner channels flickered in uneven pulses. Frost formed at the seams. When he touched the cracked module, heat bit his fingers through the glove. "You should not touch that," Saray whispered. "I do not see anyone else here with tools," he said. He lifted a nearby inspection lamp and clipped it to a rail. White light washed over the fractured cryo-sink core. The vents around it glowed with an unstable blue. He reached for a set of insulated probes. "This is going to sting," he warned. "It already does." He worked the probe under the cracked heat vent and forced it open just enough to release pressure. A sharp gasp escaped her. Cold vapor shot out, followed by a brief pulse of blue light. "That buys you, maybe 3 minutes," he said. "If I push more, the whole thing might blow." "It is enough," she whispered. But her breathing trembled. Her fingers curled weakly against the steel. He leaned back on his heels. "Saray, what is this suit really doing to you?" She hesitated. "Not fear, calculation. I should not tell you," she murmured. "Well, too late. You crashed through my roof. You nearly died twice in 20 minutes. And soldiers with drones are hunting you down." She looked up at him then, her expression caught between exhaustion and resolve. "I am not a soldier," she said. He frowned. "Could have fooled me. I am a cryptanalytic specialist with the Valor Data Council. My work concerns conflict algorithms and predictive systems. I evaluate signals that forecast war." He stared at her for a long second. "You're telling me you crunch numbers for a living?" "Yes. And someone is trying to kill you for that?" "Yes." He dragged a hand across his face. "That makes even less sense." A faint rumble passed overhead, another drone. The lights flickered from the interference. The cold deepened. Minutes slipped by, stretched longer than they should. Saray pulled in a slow breath. "Your world believes my people are preparing a preemptive strike. And you are saying you are not?" She held his gaze with surprising steadiness. "I am saying your world is being pushed into a war it did not choose." The words hung in the cold air. Evan stiffened. "Explain." "I discovered a distortion in the Interlink War Index," she said. "The model your leaders monitor to judge threat escalation. It was altered from the outside. Key indicators were shifted upward. Enough to paint Valor activity as hostile." He shook his head. "By who?" "I do not know. But the signal artifact did not come from Valor space. Something wanted your world to panic. And something wanted mine to panic in response." A beat of silence passed. She looked away, her voice barely above the cold hum. "And when I reported my findings, someone inside our chain of command tried to shut the report down. When I persisted, they tried to silence me." "By killing you?" "Yes." Evan's pulse kicked hard. "So you ran?" "I had no choice. I carried the archive shard with the uncorrupted data. If I delivered it to your leaders directly, both sides might stand down long enough to investigate." He stared at the cracked cryo-sink core. "That little module is the evidence." She nodded. A sharp thud struck the container wall. Evan flinched. Another drone sweep. Closer. The temperature dropped as the refrigeration units activated again. "You could leave," she whispered. "Tell them you hid here. They will believe you. You do not have to carry this burden." He didn't respond. He studied her instead. The frost along her armor. The trembling in her hands. The fear she tried to swallow back. He had seen desperation before, in people cornered by systems much bigger than themselves. Different wars, different flags, same machinery. He crouched beside her. "If what you say is true," he said slowly, "then both our worlds are sitting on a fuse." "Yes. And Hale thinks you are the match. He does not know he is chasing the wrong threat." Evan exhaled, long and steady. "Well," he said, "looks like I picked a bad night for a quiet shift." She stared at him with tired surprise. "You still help, after all that?" He tightened the probes on her armor. "I did not say I trust you," he replied, "but I trust what I just saw." "What did you see?" He met her eyes. "Someone terrified of the truth she carries." Outside, engines roared closer. The container walls vibrated. Evan's voice dropped to a whisper. "And someone who does not deserve to face this alone." The cold hum of the container still rang in Evan's ears when the scene shifted across Port Vega. Inside an armored command vehicle parked at the edge of Unit 47 perimeter hub. Colonel Marvin Hale stared at a wall of shifting data. Blue light washed across his face in steady pulses. A feed blinked to life. Astra 9's calm synthetic voice cut through the low rumble of engines. "Command, new visual match detected. Source: Yard Surveillance Node C12. "Put it up," Hale said. The primary screen expanded. Grainy footage from an exterior camera showed the insulated freight container Evan had forced open moments earlier. A brief arc of cold vapor drifted out before the door shut. Astra 9 processed the next frame. Thermal residue indicates two bodies. Primary heat source unstable. Secondary human signature elevated. Hale leaned forward. "Stabilize image. Enhance contrast." The AI complied. The footage sharpened enough to show the faint glow of broken conduits along Saray's armor as she vanished into the container's dark interior. The fractured cryo-sync core pulsed irregularly, lighting the frame with uneven bursts. Astra 9 continued. Subject identification now at 95%. Valen physiology. Female. Injury consistent with high-impact atmospheric entry. Hale exhaled slowly. Not fear. Calculation. Confirm human contact. The footage jumped to the next second. Evan's silhouette appeared just before the door closed. His hands braced the frame. A flicker of motion showed him pulling Saray inside. Secondary subject is male, Astra 9 reported. Matching civilian registry. Evan Rook. Mechanical technician. No military history. No political affiliations. Hale studied that a moment longer. He carried her, not coerced. Correct. Astra 9 replied. Their proximity suggests voluntary aid. Hale's jaw tightened. That complicates things. He tapped a control surface. A second hologram rose beside the first, a cascading series of probability curves. The Interlink War Index filled the display with shifting lines and rising projections. Astra 9 highlighted the red spike. Probability of armed conflict increases if subject escapes the industrial perimeter. How much? Hale asked. A beat of silence passed. 54% baseline, 91% within 1 calendar year. Hale stared at the curve. His voice stayed level. So if she crosses the industrial perimeter, the next war begins. That conclusion is statistically supported, Astra 9 said. He folded his hands behind his back. To him, this was not cruelty. Not fear. Not hatred. Only geometry on a collision path. He spoke quietly. She knows something no one wants released. That makes her the most dangerous asset on this planet. The lieutenant approached from the rear of the command vehicle. Sir, the outer teams are requesting updated threat protocol. They want confirmation whether to escalate. Hale did not raise his voice. No escalation, not yet. The lieutenant hesitated. With respect, sir, she survived atmospheric entry. Her suit is advanced. If she decides, she will not decide anything. Hale interrupted. Her suit is failing. Her vitals are unstable. And the civilian helping her. He glanced at Evan's data feed. He lacks the training to protect her long term. The lieutenant shifted. Then what is the risk? Information, Hale said. If she reaches a transmitter, a safe house, a sympathetic ear in another chain of command, we lose containment. Panic spreads. Leaders act on corrupted signals. And when two governments think the other has already chosen war. He let the sentence hang. The lieutenant finished it for him. They stop asking questions. Exactly. Hale faced the holographic map again. Red grid lines tightened around Vega cold storage. Armored transports moved into new positions. Drones shifted altitude to form overlapping sweeps. "Expand the lockdown," he said. "Block every exit from District 4 through 10. No unregistered thermal signature passes without my authorization." Astra 9 pulsed acknowledgement. Updating patrol vectors. Deploying close-range UAV mesh. Outside, engines roared to life. Floodlights blinked on across rooftops. Shadows stretched long over the loading yards as armored units repositioned. Dawn pressed closer, but the hunt did not slow. Hale turned toward the primary feed again. Open audio logs from before the container door closed. A faint, distorted line of dialogue played back. Suray's voice, weak but clear enough. "Your world is being pushed into a war it did not choose." Hale's face did not change. He spoke to ASTRA-9. "Catalog that statement as psychological leverage. It is a tactic, nothing more." Astra 9 processed the command. Logged. The lieutenant stepped beside him. "Sir, what are your orders for contact?" For the first time, Hale's voice carried weight sharp enough to cut through the hum of machinery. "Bring them back alive." He turned toward the windshield of the command vehicle as dozens of headlights snapped on across the industrial grid. The city tightened around them like a closing fist. Dawn pushed across the water in thin, quiet strokes. Evan kept the bike low as he crossed the final stretch of cracked pavement near the docks. Suray leaned heavily against his back. Her breaths thinned. The glow from her suit flickered each time he hit a bump. He slipped the bike behind a row of abandoned containers and killed the engine. The air carried a sharp scent of salt and rust. The seat pushed against the brake wall with a dull, even beat. It was the only steady rhythm left. "Stay close," he said softly. Suray nodded, but her legs trembled when she stepped down. The cryo-sync core at her spine pulsed an uneven blue. Heat distortion rippled from the vents along her ribs. Evan placed a steadying hand under her arm and guided her toward an old warehouse he once used for off-book ship repairs. The sliding door stuck half open. Metal warped from storms, but it was shelter. Inside, dust floated in long shafts of pale morning light. The smell of machine oil still clung to the walls. Evan cleared a bench with one sweep of his arm and helped her sit. "How long has it been failing?" he asked. "Since the chase began," she said. The core was not built for atmospheric strain. She tried to steady her posture, but the tremor in her fingers worsened. Evan crouched, studying the exposed seams along her suit. The cryo-sync core's temperature gauge flashed a thin red strip, overload warning. The housing around the coolant channels had begun to warp. "I can try to patch the exterior," he said, "but I don't have your tools." "You have more than you think." Her voice softened. "You repaired vessels here, did you not?" Evan paused. "How do you know that?" "I read the residue patterns on the floor. Oil type, heat slicks. You use Terran blends, but the spacing is consistent with layered hull plates. 3 meters wide." He let out a short, disbelieving breath. "You can tell all that from the ground?" "It is normal." She looked confused by his surprise. "Pattern memory is required on my station." He opened an old locker under the bench and pulled out a battered toolkit. The metal latches groaned. Inside were spanners, bond line sealers, a heat clamp, and a coil of reinforced filament, all scavenged from years of repair jobs. He laid the tools beside her. "This might sting," he said. "I do not fear pain." "That's not what I meant," Evan replied. "It might make things worse." Suray's eyes lifted to him. They held a faint silver shimmer even in the dim light. "If someone risks themselves to help me, I trust them to try." The words struck him harder than expected. He activated the heat clamp, letting it warm with a quiet hum. Then he lifted one panel of her suit and saw the coolant channel beneath. The stress fractures looked like spiderweb glass, thin, sharp, and growing. He worked carefully, applying filament along each seam. The clamp sealed it with short bursts of heat. Suray exhaled slowly with every burst, keeping her breathing steady. Outside, a ship horn sounded across the water. The bay carried the distant thunder of engines starting for the morning trade run. It made the warehouse feel even quieter. "You could have left me," Suray said at last. "You had many chances." "Didn't feel right," Evan said. Because I am unarmed? No, he said, because you were afraid, and trying not to show it. She blinked. We do not discuss fear. It complicates action. It also keeps you alive. Saray considered that. Your people choose differently. Not always, he said, but sometimes we choose to stay when every part of us says go. She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decode a pattern she had never been taught. The trembling in her hands eased slightly. The suit's core flickered with a more stable blue. You bought us time, she said. Not enough, Evan answered. They'll search the docks next. We are close to the water. That limits their entry angles. That's the problem, Evan said. Limits ours too. A gust swept through a broken panel in the wall. Salt coated the air. Light brushed across Saray's face and softened her edges. She looked almost calm, despite everything pressing in around them. Evan tightened the last seal and stepped back. That's all I can do. It is more than enough. He didn't believe that, but he didn't argue. Not with the sound of distant rotors moving closer. Not with his pulse tightening. Saray followed his gaze toward the crack in the metal wall. Her expression shifted. She heard it too. They stayed silent for a few seconds, listening to the engines spreading across the coastline. They did not know it yet, but this quiet moment was the last they would get. The rotors faded, replaced by the steady push of the tide. Minutes drifted by, heavy as tidewater pressing through a narrow gate. Saray shifted on the bench, steadying her breaths. Evan stayed beside her, eyes tracing the seams he had patched. We cannot stay long, she said quietly. I know. But he needed answers, more than ever. Saray reached under the collar of her suit and pulled out a small crystalline shard. It was triangular, no larger than a thumb, but etched with faint vector lines that shimmered when it caught the light. What is that? Evan asked. AQ vector shard, she said. It holds the fragment I escaped with. She tapped its edge against the metal bench. A thin hologram spread between them, flickering with unstable light. The image wavered like a candle struggling in wind. Cooling vents in her suit rattled in protest. The projection resolved into a data lattice. Red nodes pulsed across it like infected veins. This is the Interlink War Index, she said. It models conflict probability between stellar powers. Evan frowned. Looks like it's breaking apart. It is being corrupted. Her voice thinned. Watch. She isolated a cluster and magnified it. Evan leaned closer. Inside the lattice, lines of code crawled like electrical scars. Every few seconds, a new spike lit up. The entire index skewed higher. What's doing that? Evan asked. A foreign protocol. Not Valor. Not Terran. Not any known alliance. Saray expanded a thread of corrupted data. Symbols flashed in a pattern too precise to be random. Too cold to be natural drift. Evan felt a chill. Someone's pushing both sides toward a fight. Yes. Her hands tightened. If this continues, your world becomes a calculated target. Not because it is hostile, but because it is convenient. He looked at her. Convenient for who? For the faction that inserted this sequence. She paused. We do not know their name. We only track their work. She shifted the hologram again, showing a chart rising toward a red band. This signal drove the index to emergency thresholds. When it hits full red, the prediction becomes reality. Militaries act before leaders can stop them. And that's why Hale's after you. Yes. She steadied her breath. He believes I came here to trigger that signal. He thinks I am part of the hostile faction. But you're not. No, I analyze transmissions. I do not create them. Her eyes dimmed. If I am captured, this proof disappears, and war becomes inevitable. The words hung there, heavy and cold. Evan felt the weight settle in his chest. He stared at the data. Red, rising, relentless. The hologram flickered again as the shard overheated. Saray gripped the bench to stay upright. The suit sputtered a tired hum. How long until it hits full red? Evan asked. Months, perhaps less. She lowered her gaze. I escaped to deliver the truth before it is too late. He ran a hand through his hair. You're telling me the only evidence that could stop a war is sitting in an old warehouse with a failing coolant core? Yes, she said softly. And someone decided I'm the one who gets pulled into this. She tilted her head. You helped me when you did not need to. That makes you difficult to predict. It makes you safe. Safe? He let out a thin breath. I'm a mechanic, not a soldier. Then you understand machines, she said, including broken ones. He met her gaze. Her eyes held a quiet steadiness that felt both alien and familiar. The hologram dimmed again. A few red nodes flared like wounds in the data. So this is real, he said. It is real enough to kill worlds, she answered. Silence returned for a moment, broken only by the sea brushing against the docks. The air felt colder than before. Why me? He murmured. Why now? Saray opened her mouth to answer. But a dull thud shook the far wall. Dust fell from the rafters. Evan froze. Another thud. Metal rattled. A faint mechanical hum swept across the roof. Low and searching. The perimeter had found them. The third impact shook the beams above them. Dust rained in thin sheets. Evan steadied Saray as she tried to rise. They found us, he whispered. Saray closed her eyes. He is cutting the perimeter tighter. A low electrical hum swept across the warehouse roof. It grew sharper, bending the air like a tuning fork forced past its limit. Evan grabbed his handheld radio out of instinct. Static. Then nothing. Not even a hiss. He tapped it again. The silence stayed absolute. What did he do? Evan asked. Saray looked toward the ceiling. He deployed a signal cutter array. It erases every channel. Above ground, below ground, even in closed loops. That's impossible. Not for him. Her voice thinned. He will not allow us to speak. Not to your leaders. Not even to each other. The next hum came deeper. It rolled through the metal floor like a warning tremor. Outside, light swept across the bay windows in wide arcs. Harsh beams cut across the water, tracing the line of empty mooring posts. Dusk settled over the docks, but the pressure did not ease. Evan moved to the broken window and looked out. A convoy of armored vehicles pushed down the main access road. Their engines rumbled with slow confidence. Each vehicle carried a mounted sensor rig that swept the buildings in narrow cones of white light. Behind them, a row of UAVs descended through the fading sky. Their wings folded slightly as they dropped lower, adjusting to street-level pursuit. The sound of their turbines mixed with the distant crash of waves, turning the whole pier into a single vibrating drum. He is sealing every exit, Saray said quietly. Evan forced the radio to life again. No change. Whatever Hale had activated erased even the emergency frequencies. Across the docks, a secondary convoy slid into view, blocking the coastal road. Tires ground against concrete. Floodlights snapped on, painting the water in hard strips of blue-white glare. Astra 9's voice echoed faintly from a distant speaker system. Evan could not make out the words, only the calm cadence that carried through the wind. Saray swallowed. He knows we are here. Evan turned to her. How? We shut everything. No heat spikes. No comms. She lifted a hand toward her chest plate. My suit is failing. The core leaks pulse heat every few minutes. He would read that. Her breath shook. He always reads that. The realization hit Evan harder than the drones. Hale was not guessing. Hale was tracking. Another hum hit the building, rattling the walls. Glass cracked down the center of the window. Evan backed away, heart pounding against his ribs. He will not breach yet, Saray said. First he cuts options, then he cuts hope. Well, he's doing a damn good job. Outside, 4 soldiers stepped onto the pier, rifles angled low but ready. Their visors reflected the floodlights. A larger vehicle rolled up behind them, its tower-mounted projector spinning slowly to map the warehouse in thermal slices. The projector beeped twice, adjusted, beeped again. Evan felt the sound in his teeth. Once he confirms the leak in my core, Saray whispered, he will tighten the lines. He sees us as a risk. A civilian carrying an unknown alien. That equals a strategic threat. The turbines above them grew louder as 2 UAVs swept directly overhead. Their metal wings cast trembling shadows across the broken floor. Can you still walk? Evan asked. Yes, not far. We may not get afar. The floodlights brightened again. The waves below the pier turned a deeper color, the reflections shifting like molten glass. Evan looked down at his hands, shaking despite the cold. One alien fugitive and one mechanic, he murmured. And suddenly it's a war. Saray lowered her gaze. You saved me. That alone changes probabilities he cannot measure. That doesn't help me choose. Choose what? He exhaled through clenched teeth. Do I help one person or step back and save billions? The words tasted like metal. Because both answers felt wrong. Outside, engines revved as the armored line repositioned. Tires scraped. Hydraulics hissed. The convoy's lights swept over the water again, turning the surface a harsh red, fluid and violent under the crushing glow. Evan stared through the cracked window. Breath tight, heart louder than the machinery closing in. And the lights of the armored convoy painted the waves blood red. The last traces of daylight had already faded when Evan shut the warehouse door behind them. The clang of the latch echoed through the empty structure. Outside, UAV engines pulsed against the metal roof, each sweep a reminder that their window was shrinking. He dragged the workbench closer to the center of the room, rolled Saray gently onto it, and reached for the cracked plating along her ribs. The phase shift suit twitched in uneven pulses. When he lifted one of the modules, thin vapor drifted upward in fractured spirals. He pulled a length of coolant conduit from the wall. When he opened the valve, a rush of icy brine surged out, white mist blooming around his hands. The fog drifted over the bench, settling across the damaged seams of the suit. Saray watched him with unfocused eyes. That line, it is not meant for armor systems. I know, he said, it is meant for ship engines. And your suit's running hotter than any engine I have ever touched. He angled the coolant, letting the mist spill beneath the broken core. The cryo-sync module emitted a fragile hiss, half protest and half relief. The suit's plates shifted slightly, reflecting the dim lights strung across the rafters. Outside, the roof trembled again under the weight of another drone sweep. Evan didn't glance up. This is the last place Hale will check, he said, but that only buys us minutes. Saray tried to sit up. She managed a few inches before pain cut through her breath. He steadied her by the shoulder. You need to stay still, he muttered. Her voice was thin but steady. Stability is impossible. The core is collapsing inward. It will start drawing ambient heat from my body to compensate. How much? She held his gaze. More than is safe. He exhaled once, the sound tight. And you are still going to use it. I have to. She shifted slightly, the damaged suit clicking around her. Without the suit active, the data will never reach orbit. And if it dies here, the truth dies with it. He pressed a hand to the table and leaned in. You keep saying truth. You keep risking yourself for it. You realize every bone in my body is telling me to get you as far from the fight as possible. You have already done more than any Terran I have met. Her eyes softened. I do not expect you to carry the rest. But I am carrying it, he said, and I need this thing to hold together long enough for you to finish what you started. He turned back to the coolant line and cinched two steel clamps onto the module's edge. When he tightened them, the entire suit shuddered, lights flickering across the plates. Minutes pressed together in a cold, breathless stretch. Saray watched him work in silence. The brine mist curled around her arms and drifted down the table legs. Somewhere farther along the docks, a ship horn sounded, low and distant. The echo rolled through the dark warehouse like a tired pulse. Evan adjusted the improvised coolant lattice and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. This is the best I can do with dock parts and a dying suit. It won't last long. How long? She asked. He hesitated. Just under 90 seconds of stable phase shift output. Then that is enough. Her voice carried no doubt. Only acceptance. He stared at her, searching for any sign she didn't fully understand the risk. But she understood more than he did, about the suit. About the data. About the knife edge they were walking. You think this is worth your life? He asked. If it keeps two worlds from destroying each other, yes. He swallowed hard. The answer was simple. The weight behind it wasn't. Outside, a drone dipped lower. The metallic whine cut close to the roofline. He killed the interior lamps in a quick motion. The warehouse fell into dim blue shadows. Light reflected from the coolant mist and from the emergency strips along the wall. Saray watched him move through the darkness. You hesitate less now. "You scare me less now," he said, not sure if that is smart or dangerous. "Trust is always dangerous," she whispered, "but it is also the only path forward." He reached for the final connector and locked it into the core's housing. Blue light flared through the conduits, pulling hard against the coolant. The suit steadied, then settled into a low hum. Not stable, but alive. Saray let out a slow breath as the heat drained from her chest. Her fingers trembled, then stilled. "You did it," she murmured. "Barely." He checked the clamps again. "Once you activate full shift, this whole thing goes into overdrive. And when it does, the suit will take whatever heat it can find, including yours." "I understand." "No," he said quietly. "I mean it will hurt." She looked down at the dimly glowing core. "Pain is temporary. War is not." The words hit him harder than he expected. He stepped back, running a hand across the side of the bench. Far outside the warehouse, the rumble of armored transports drifted closer. Headlights swept across the edge of the dock, painting long bars of white against the fog. "We don't have much time," he said, hails closing the entire port. Saray touched the module with the back of her hand. Cold light rippled under her fingers. "Then we finish this before he reaches us." Evan tightened the final bolt on the auxiliary coolant bracket. His hands shook for a moment, then steadied. He met her eyes. "Even if it's only 87 seconds," he said softly, "then those 87 seconds have to be enough." The warehouse shook again, this time from something heavier than drones. Evan looked toward the loading ramp as the Echo rolled under the metal plating. Engines, multiple, the kind that only moved when a blockade was about to snap shut. Saray pushed herself upright. The repaired core along her side flickered once, then steadied into a dim, uneven glow. He heard the faint tick of cooling metal, then the sharp crack of something heating too fast. "You ready?" he asked. "No," she whispered, "but it no longer matters." She pressed her palm to the side of her suit. A ripple of distortion shimmered outward, light bending just enough to reveal the phase shift system restarting. The cloaking field wasn't clean. It jittered along her shape like fractured glass. "That does not look stable," Evan muttered. "It is not." She met his eyes. "Start the count when I move." Outside, a voice shouted orders through a modulated speaker. Clamps slammed against pavement. Pneumatics hissed. The roof lit up red as a flare arced overhead, washing the docks in harsh, surgical brightness. Evan pulled the coolant hoses off their mounts and slung them over his shoulder. "We go on my mark." From somewhere above the docks, a micro-pulse UAV descended with a soft, metallic hum, its tri-radar dish spinning in tight circles. The red beam thinned to a surgical line. "Sniper team, anchor positions," a distant voice said over a military comm line. He felt the air change. They were surrounded. He gripped Saray's arm. "Now." They burst out of the warehouse. Cold night air slammed into them, mixed with salt spray from the breaking tide. The docks glowed under flare light, white and red reflecting across steel containers stacked 3 stories high. The first UAV swept left. A micropulse flashed across the dirt beside Evan's boot, turning pebbles into vapor. He yanked Saray behind a loading crate. "That one has radar tuned for small shifts. It will see me if I run," she said. "Then don't give it a clean reading." He shoved a release lever on a forklift he'd repaired years before. The machine sputtered, then roared awake. He slammed the throttle. The forks lifted a stack of metal sheets in a grinding screech. He tilted the mast and dropped them with a thunderous crash. The UAV re-evaluated instantly, beams shifting to the falling debris. "Move," Evan shouted. Saray leaned against him as they ran along a narrow lane between containers. Every few seconds, her suit shed a ripple of heat that burned the air behind them. Evan checked his watch. 87 seconds left. 2 soldiers rounded the far corner. Rifles up, Evan grabbed a pressurized ammonia canister from a valve post and cracked it open. A cloud of gas erupted, white and biting. The soldiers coughed, optics fogging instantly. The UAV above them struggled to parse the sudden carbon dioxide spike and chemical saturation. "That bought us 10 seconds," Evan said. Saray's breathing tightened. Her entire suit vibrated with each step. plates clicking like strained bones. "The core is rising too fast," she said. "When it crosses the limit, phase shift will collapse." "Not before you send the data," he said. They reached the higher section of the dock where the storage cranes overlooked the water. The flare's red wash met the pale glow of incoming dawn, turning the sky into a split horizon. Snipers shifted on rooftops, scopes flickering in the dim. Seconds behaved strangely, stretching thin, then snapping back sharp. Evan pointed toward a comm tower rising from the far end of the dock. "That's your window. That tower still pings the satellite net for fishing routes. Enough to piggyback the transmission," she whispered. The ground trembled as heavy boots filled the next corridor. Hale's voice carried through the metal canyons. "Team Bravo, cut off the north path. Team Delta, converge from the cranes. Do not injure the civilian unless unavoidable." Evan pulled Saray behind the shell of an old cargo winch as a line of soldiers advanced. Their visors glowed faint blue. CO2 sensors blinked on their chests. A drone dove low, firing another micropulse that sliced a warning arc against the crane's leg. "We can't run straight," Evan said. "They have the ground covered." Saray steadied herself. "Then we do not go on the ground." Her gaze lifted toward the crane lattice overhead. Evan followed her eyes and exhaled sharply. "You have got to be kidding me. It shortens the distance. 50 meters only. And a 15-meter drop if we slip." "We do not slip." He swore under his breath and climbed the ladder. She followed, though every rung shook under her unstable suit. At the top, the crane walkway creaked beneath their weight. Wind pushed against them in sharp, cold bursts. "Evan," she whispered. "What?" "The count." He glanced at his watch. 42 seconds. Her suit emitted a long, strained whine. Frost crawled over the coolant bracket. The emergency strips flickered along the core's housing. Below them, troops formed a containment wall. Ahead, the comm tower pulsed with a steady blue light. "Go," Evan said. They sprinted. The walkway jolted with every step. Metal groaned. Saray's figure shimmered with unstable distortion. Every few meters, the phase shift flickered, half visible, half ghost. A sniper round cracked the air, striking the railing inches from Evan's hand. Sparks sprayed. The walkway shook. He pushed forward anyway. 24 seconds. They reached the final beam connecting to the tower's maintenance platform. Saray stumbled. Her knees buckled. Evan caught her under the arm. "You're almost there," he said through clenched teeth. The core flashed bright, then dimmed. 14 seconds. She reached toward the tower's uplink node with trembling fingers. Her hand hovered inches from the interface. A blast of wind hit them. Evan braced his legs. The dock below erupted in light as Hale's forces closed every remaining exit. 10 seconds. Saray pressed her palm to the node. A pulse of light surged through her suit. "Transmission, starting," she whispered. The core glowed white, steam pouring from the coolant brackets. Metal hissed. The walkway vibrated. Evan's fingers tightened around her arm. 5 seconds. The node flickered. 3. 2. Saray's body convulsed as the suit drained heat straight from her muscles. She sagged forward, nearly collapsing. Evan steadied her. The display lit up, upload bar rising. 98%. He turned and froze. A lone figure stepped out from the cluster of armored transports, the lights behind him turning the air red. Colonel Hale. Blocking their only descent. Evan hit the brakes on instinct. Boots scraping metal. Saray slumped. The upload crept forward. And the night closed in around them. The crane walkway shuddered under Evan's boots as floodlights snapped on at once, pinning him in a hard white glare. The breath caught in his throat. His palms stung where the metal railing had bitten into his skin. UAV rotors carved the air above him, their downdraft whipping cold mist across the dock. Hale stepped forward through the shifting haze below, framed by armored plating and overlapping beams of light. He held no shield, no flourish, just a sidearm angled down, steady as stone. His expression was calm, focused, a mind built on patterns. "Step away from her," Hale said. Evan tightened his grip on Saray, still slumped against him. Her armor flickered with fading pulses, the last residue of the suit's cooling loop racing toward failure. He did not move. Hale raised the gun slightly. "You saved one life tonight." His voice never rose. "I am trying to save billions." Evan felt the words hit like a blade. Sharp, precise, logical, the kind of logic that could crush a world if left unchallenged. Behind him, Saray stirred. Her voice trembled. "The data, it's leaving now." A faint tone echoed from her wrist node, steady, rising, final. The uplink was almost complete. Hale's jaw shifted, a small, near-invisible break in his composure. He understood what that tone meant. "Transmission status?" he asked, eyes still locked on Evan. Astra 9 answered from the nearest drone. 98%. Integrity holding. Hale did not look at the drone. He stepped closer along the dock below, never breaking line of sight. "You think you stopped a war," he said, "but you may have started a worse one. We cannot confirm her intentions. We cannot confirm the source. We cannot confirm anything." Evan forced himself to stand straighter on the shaking walkway. "Then why shoot?" he asked. "If what you want is the truth." Hale stopped 2 paces from the base of the tower. The muzzle still pointed toward Evan's chest. "Because once misinformation spreads, there is no pulling it back. One wrong signal, one false message, then every defense grid on this planet prepares for impact." Saray tried to sit up. She failed. Her voice cracked through the cold air. "It is not false." Hale finally turned his eyes toward her. "You have given us nothing verified," he said. "Only claims, only fear. Why should I stake my world on your calculations?" She breathed shallowly. "Because someone corrupted your calculations. Not mine, not Valor, a third hand." Evan looked between them. The pressure built in his throat. Seconds felt slow, then sharp, then slow again. "Sir," Astra 9 reported, "transmission at 99%. A tremor caught Hale's hand. He had seconds left. Evan shifted fully in front of Saray, shaking but unmoving. "You say you save humanity," he said softly, "but all you've done tonight is chase shadows. You don't understand the weight here." Hale replied. "I do," Evan said, "more than I ever wanted. But she isn't the spark of a war. Fear is." For the first time, Hale's expression shifted, conflict under the surface. Tense and quiet. The final uplink tone sounded. Astra 9 spoke with clinical certainty. "Transmission complete. Remote verification underway." Everything froze. No rotor moved, no soldier advanced, no wind stirred. The only sound was Saray's ragged breathing against the dawn-chilled air. Hale's arm wavered, not much. Just enough for the light to catch the tremor. He looked at the rising sun edging over the water. The sky turned pale gold. Smoke from spent coolants lifted in thin white columns. The floodlights painted long shadows across the broken dock. Hale lowered the gun. Not in surrender, not in understanding, but in recognition. He could no longer stop what had already moved beyond him. His voice came low. "I hope, for your sake, that the truth you sent is real." Evan exhaled, unable to speak. Saray slumped against his back, barely conscious. The first ray of sunlight struck the mist, turning it to drifting glass. Everything held still for one suspended heartbeat. And then the moment passed. Cold ash drifted from the torn containers, each fragment turning lazily in the metallic morning air. The last floodlight from Hale's perimeter team still swept across the broken yard, catching thin ribbons of freezing vapor sliding low along the ground. Evan knelt beside Saray, keeping an arm around her as both struggled to steady their breaths after the desperate run. Dawn touched the edge of the industrial district, a pale stripe of light weakened by dust and sleepless hours. For a heartbeat, it felt like another strike team might crash in from the shadows. No footsteps arrived, no UAVs dove down, no warning shots cracked the air. Instead, Hale's comm unit cut through the quiet with a sharp, surgical tone. "Colonel Hale, stand down immediately." The voice of command authority. High level, absolute. Hale froze. His hand still hovered near the weapon he had lowered moments earlier. He lifted the comm closer, eyes never leaving Evan and Saray. "Command, we had the targets contained," he said, disbelief tightening his voice. Transmission occurred, but I can. Colonel, the data has been reviewed. The reply overrode him, calm but unyielding. You are ordered to cease all pursuit. Hale's expression hardened. On what grounds? A holographic projection blinked to life inside the perimeter hub behind him. Everyone still conscious could see it. The decoded structure of the data Surrey had transmitted, now annotated, expanded, and labeled by analysts at Central Command. A cluster of malicious code pulsed in the display, its waveform matching neither Valar nor Terran signatures. No alignment with any known war archive. No origin from either faction. A fingerprint from a third actor. Hale stared at the pattern, as if the ground had shifted under him. He spoke to no one in particular. This wasn't from them? The voice on the comm continued. Both subjects are now under witness protection protocol. Secure the site and withdraw. Do not engage. Silence followed, heavy, metallic silence. Evan tightened his hold on Surrey as she fought to stay awake. It's real, she managed, her voice thin. They saw it. Hale lowered the comm, eyes unfocused for a moment, then fixed on the cracked concrete. So all this time, the rest of the sentence never came. Too much had fallen apart too quickly. Around the yard, UAVs lowered altitude and powered down their auxiliary rotors. Laser markers faded. Soldiers shifted from assault posture to withdrawal, slow and unsure. The minutes that followed felt carved out of cold metal. No one rushed. No one barked orders. Every motion felt cautious, as if the world were adjusting itself in slow increments. Hale holstered his weapon, the movement deliberate and almost reluctant, like a man learning a new shape of reality. After a long pause, he stepped forward. His boots scraped over fractured concrete, each step sharp and echoing. Evan rose to face him, keeping Surrey shielded behind. If you came to finish this, he said, you'll have to go through me. Hale stopped a few paces away. The cold precision in his eyes was gone. What replaced it was something quieter, an officer renegotiating everything he thought he understood. It seems, Hale said, voice low, the battlefield was not where we thought. He glanced at Surrey, then back to Evan. And in the washed-out morning light, for the first time since the chase began, Hale no longer looked like a hunter. The med bay door slid shut behind them, muting the sharp echoes of soldiers pulling back from the yard. Inside the temporary treatment room of the TDC outpost, the world finally felt still. Cool blue light spread across the narrow walls, mixing with the faint, sterile mist drifting from the filtration vents. Machines hummed in slow, even breaths. Evan sat beside the cot where Surrey lay recovering, her skin still pale from the strain of the transmission. The cryo-sink core on her suit was open and exposed, its coolant reservoirs empty, its protective sheen long faded. She no longer looked like someone wearing alien armor, only someone exhausted, vulnerable, and very human in the ways that mattered. A technician passed quietly, removing the Q-vector module from the data tray. We'll run a full backup, he said. Command wants multiple copies. Whatever she sent, it changed everything. Evan nodded but didn't take his eyes off Surrey. Make sure it stays intact. That data might be the only thing keeping the peace standing. When the room grew quiet again, Surrey shifted slightly. Her voice was faint but steady enough to break the silence. Evan? He leaned closer. I'm here. Her eyes opened, still unfocused from fatigue. The tension that had been in them for days was gone. No fear, no flight, only a question that had been waiting beneath everything she had endured. Why did you help me, even when I am not from your world? Evan exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his hand across his brow. Because you weren't the threat, he said, and you never acted like one. She watched him, searching his face as if confirming something she had not dared believe. Most people fear what is different. Most people, Evan replied, don't get chased across half a port district with you. A tired smile touched his mouth. Brief but real. I saw how you tried to avoid hurting anyone. Hale didn't see that, but I did. She breathed in, the motion tight but easier than before. You trusted me, even when logic said not to. Logic didn't watch you fight to send the truth. He answered, I did. Hours slipped by, softened by the steady breathing of machines. No alarms blared, no soldiers burst through the door. The world outside the med bay seemed held at a distance, contained. Controlled. Settling back into shape after nearly tearing open. Saray lifted her hand slightly. Fingers trembling. Evan reached out without thinking. Steadying her wrist. Her touch was warm despite exhaustion. Her pulse faint but steady. "Your world is worth saving," she whispered. The words landed with a quiet weight that filled the room more than any warning or order ever had. Not dramatic, not grand, just honest. Evan held her gaze. And for the first time since the night everything began, something inside him eased. She trusted him. And now, the fate of both their worlds would depend on what they chose next. By noon, the med bay had grown too quiet. The tension of the night had drained away, leaving only the low hum of equipment and the filtered glow of pale lamps. When Saray was stable enough to stand, Evan guided her outside, past the patrol lines and down the narrow path that led toward the shoreline. Port Vega opened before them in long strokes of silver water and muted morning light. The tide had begun to rise, soft waves folding over the marks left in the sand by armored tires and heavy boots. Farther out, engines throbbed from a cargo ship turning toward open sea, its silhouette faint behind drifting mist. Saray paused near the edge of the beach, watching the horizon as if it were a map she was still learning to read. Her breathing was slow, careful, but no longer strained. Footsteps approached from behind them, measured, steady, unmistakable. Evan turned. Hale walked alone. No convoy. No soldiers. No drone shadow humming overhead. Just the man. He stopped a few paces away, the sea wind tugging lightly at the edges of his uniform. For a moment, none of them spoke. The ocean filled the silence with the sound of foam breaking against the rocks. "You changed the field tonight," Hale said at last, his voice lower than before. "But war never sleeps." Evan met his eyes, tired but steady. "Maybe it won't sleep," he answered, "but we can make it blink." The words hung between them, not defiant, not triumphant, just honest in a way that belonged to people who had run out of easy answers. Hale looked down at the sand where the tide erased the last traces of his perimeter. "We built entire doctrines to prevent another collapse," he said. "Layers of caution, layers of fear. I followed them because they were all we had." Saray spoke gently. "Fear builds walls, but walls can turn truth into an enemy." Hale's gaze shifted toward her, calculating. Respectful. Conflicted. "Your data will change many things," he said. "Some will welcome it, others will fight it. That is why the truth had to survive." Saray replied. "Not to win a war, but to stop one." A quiet passed through the group. The kind that felt heavy and strangely fragile. The afternoon drifted slow, as if the world waited for its next step. Hale drew a long breath, then looked at Evan. "What you did, there will be consequences. For all of us." Evan nodded. "There already were." Saray stepped closer, her eyes reflecting the rolling surface of the sea. "Peace is not a path," she said. "It is a choice we must make again." Hale studied them both, two people from different worlds who had refused to let fear decide the future. His jaw tensed, then eased, as if he were releasing something he had carried too long. He gave a single, slow nod, a single act of mercy. He said quietly, "May cost more than a battlefield." Evan answered without hesitation, "Then it's worth the price." A single kind choice can shift the fate of worlds, if we dare to pay its price. The three of them stood together at the water's edge, watching the horizon burn into soft gold as the sun continued its climb. The waves rolled in, washing away the tracks of the night before, erasing the signs of what almost happened. But not the memory of it. When the mist rose and the light brightened, none of them moved. The future waited beyond the tide. And for the first time, they faced it together. And so, as the tide washed away the last traces of the night, one truth remained. Sometimes the future doesn't change because of armies, fleets, or grand declarations, but because one person chooses compassion when it costs the most. Evan, Saray, and Hale stood at the edge of a quiet world that almost burned. Knowing the choices ahead would not be simple, but also knowing they would no longer face them alone. If this story moved you, stay with us, like the video, share it with someone who loves deep sci-fi, and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter in this growing universe.